snow whirled like shattered glass under the streetlight when the SUV screeched to a halt beside the dump. A door slammed. A man in a black coat stepped out, his breath steaming in the frozen air. Ahead of him, a tiny figure stumbled through the snow. A little girl clutching a rusted lunchbox, her bare feet blue against the ice. From the darkness came a woman's drunken shout, the car engine roaring away. The child fell to her knees, sobbing. The man froze, his pulse pounding. He didn't know why, but something about that moment, that cry, would tear open the rest of his life. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. Snow was falling thick and silent over the outskirts of Detroit. Streetlights flickered in the wind, their weak glow trembling like candle flames in a storm. The world looked frozen in grey, except for a small figure standing beside a pile of discarded junk. A girl no older than 8, clutching a rusted lunchbox to her chest. Her name was Mia Carter. She had been pushed out of the only home she knew, a creaking trailer parked on a forgotten road. Her stepmother's voice still echoed behind her, sharp and cold. "You're nothing but an extra mouth to feed." The door slammed. Tires spun on ice. And then there was nothing but the sound of the wind. Mia stood barefoot on the snow-packed ground, her breath fogging the air as she tried to blow warmth into her small hands. Inside the metal box was a single piece of stale bread and a folded drawing, a crooked house with yellow windows, and the words written in a child's shaky hand for Dad. When winter ends. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine hummed, too quiet, too smooth for this part of town. A few moments later, a Tesla Model X rolled to a stop. Its headlights swept across the snow, turning it silver. The door opened and a man stepped out, tall with dark hair sprinkled with grey. His face looked tired, but his eyes, they carried warmth, the kind that could melt through the cold. He looked at Mia for a long moment, then took off his heavy coat and knelt beside her. "No one deserves to freeze alone," he said softly. For a second, Mia didn't move. Then, like a fragile bird seeking shelter, she let him wrap the coat around her shoulders. The warmth was almost painful. The man's name was Lucas Grant, though Mia didn't know it yet. To her, he was simply the first light that didn't fade in the snow. The next morning, the snow hadn't stopped. It pressed down on everything: roofs, cars, power lines, until the whole neighborhood looked like it was holding its breath. Lucas parked his car near an old gas station on the edge of town. Inside the Tesla, the air was warm and faintly smelled of coffee and leather. Mia sat curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped in his oversized coat. Her small fingers traced the touchscreen on the dashboard, amazed that the screen moved when she did. Every so often she glanced at him, cautious, unsure whether this kindness was real or just a dream she'd soon wake from. Lucas noticed. He kept his voice calm, low, like talking to a wild animal that might run at the wrong sound. "You hungry?" She nodded barely. He handed her a sandwich from the console. She hesitated before taking a bite, chewing slowly, as if afraid the food might disappear. Outside, the world was still. A sign across the street read, "Snowbelt Diner, closed for good." Half the windows were boarded up. Factories once filled with workers now stood hollow, their chimneys like broken pencils stabbing at the grey sky. Lucas had grown up just a few miles from here. Back then, the Snowbelt wasn't a ghost town. It was full of noise machines, laughter, radio music, the smell of oil and snow. His mother had worked in a laundry shop washing uniforms for the factory men. She used to hum old gospel songs while hanging the clothes by the stove. She died in a cold snap when Lucas was 10. The heater broke, and there wasn't enough money to fix it. He still remembered her hand, stiff and pale, still clutching the rosary she'd prayed over every night. Mia reminded him of that little boy, the one who had stood helpless beside a frozen window, promising himself that one day he'd build something that could keep people warm. He looked at her now, sitting quietly with crumbs on her coat. "What's your name, Mia?" she said softly. "Mia Carter." "That's a strong name," he replied. She smiled just barely. "My dad gave it to me." Her voice cracked on the word dad. Lucas waited, giving her space. After a long pause, she whispered, "He worked in the battery plant," before it exploded. Lucas turned his gaze to the windshield. He had heard of that explosion. It was one of the first stories that had made him question the industry he helped build. 5 men died. The company blamed faulty wiring, but something about it had never added up. He said, "When winter ends, we'll have our own house." With light in every room, she continued. "He drew it for me before he went to work." She opened her rusted lunchbox and unfolded the paper again. The same crooked house with yellow windows. Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. He reached out, touching the corner of the drawing carefully, as if it might crumble. "That's a beautiful dream, Mia." She looked up. Can dreams still come true if the person's gone? The question hung between them like the breath in the cold air. Lucas wanted to say yes, but his voice caught. Too many memories, too many promises, broken by time. Instead, he said, "Sometimes they do, but only if someone else carries them on." She didn't reply. She just nodded and closed the lunchbox. For the rest of the drive, neither spoke much. The snow thinned as they entered downtown Detroit, where the city lights glowed behind a veil of frost. Lucas stopped in front of a quiet building, an old service garage he still owned, left from the early days when he'd built his first prototype. Inside it was cold but dry. A single heater buzzed weakly in the corner. Shelves were stacked with old blueprints and tools, everything covered in a fine film of dust. "This was where I started," Lucas said almost to himself, "before the suits and the headlines." Mia ran her fingers over a table full of metal parts. "You build cars." "I try to build hope," he said with a faint smile. "Cars just happened to come with it." He found an old blanket and spread it near the heater. "You can rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do, okay?" She hesitated again. "You're not gonna send me back?" Lucas looked down at her, the small, trembling child who had somehow survived the kind of cruelty that kills the spirit long before the body. "No, Mia, you're safe now." That night, as the heater clicked and the snow whispered against the windows, Lucas sat at his old workbench, staring at the blueprints of an unfinished project, a clean energy battery design he'd abandoned years ago. Something in Mia's eyes, in that drawing she carried, had stirred something long buried. He turned the lamp back on and picked up his pencil. Outside, the storm eased, and the first light of dawn began to glow over Detroit's frozen rooftops. For the next few days, the storm refused to let go of the city. Detroit lay buried under snow and silence, as if the world itself had pressed pause. The roads were empty except for the occasional hum of an electric car passing through the white haze. Inside the old garage, life slowly took shape again. Mia spent her mornings sitting near the heater, sketching with a broken pencil on scraps of paper she found around the workshop. Lucas repaired the leaky roof and made runs to the corner store for supplies. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice carried the kind of quiet strength that made her feel safe. The first time Mia laughed was when she found an old toy car buried in a toolbox. She placed it on the floor and pushed it gently toward Lucas. "Does it still work?" He crouched beside her, smiling. "Let's find out." Together, they tinkered for almost an hour, cleaning, rewiring, soldering. When the little motor finally whirred to life, Mia clapped her hands. "See, broken things can still work." Lucas paused at her words. Broken things can still work. It wasn't just a child's optimism, it was a reminder. A truth he had forgotten somewhere along the climb to success. That evening they ate soup from tin cans by the small heater. Mia looked at him across the flickering light. "Mr. Lucas, why did you stop building cars?" He leaned back, thinking. "Because sometimes when you build something too big, you lose sight of why you started. Why did you start?" He smiled faintly. "Because I wanted to keep people warm. My mother died in the cold when I was your age. I thought, if I built cars that didn't burn the world, maybe no one would have to freeze again." Mia listened quietly, then asked, "Do you think my dad's cold now?" The question hit him like a gust of wind. Lucas swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "No, sweetheart. I think he's where winter can't reach." For a long time after that, neither spoke. Only the soft hum of the heater filled the room. By the fourth day, the snow had begun to melt. Lucas decided to take Mia into the city to get her checked by a doctor and buy new clothes. She insisted on bringing her lunchbox, even though the latch barely held. "It keeps my dad close," she said. As they walked through downtown, heads turned. A tall man in a black coat walking hand in hand with a little girl who looked too small for her oversized boots. A few people recognized him, Lucas Grant, the founder of Grant Motors, the man who once promised to revolutionize clean energy. He could feel the whispers following him. A billionaire, with a child from the slums, the kind of story tabloids loved. Still, he kept walking. At the thrift shop, Mia tried on a red wool coat. The sleeves were too long, but when she twirled in front of the mirror, her reflection finally looked like a child again. Lucas caught himself smiling, something he hadn't done in months. "You look like Christmas," he said. Her eyes lit up. "Do you think I could see Christmas lights this year?" He nodded. "We'll make sure of it." It was the first real promise he had made in years. That night, back at the garage, the power flickered. The heater sputtered and the lights dimmed. Lucas went out to check the generator behind the building. As he worked, he heard soft footsteps in the snow. Mia had followed him, her small hands clutching the lunchbox. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently. "I wasn't scared," she replied. "I just didn't want you to be alone." He knelt down so their eyes met. The wind whipped through the alley, carrying snowflakes between them like falling stars. "You're a brave girl, Mia." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her drawing, the crooked house with yellow windows. "You can have it," she said shyly, "so you don't forget to make one." Lucas took the drawing, his breath clouding in the air. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise one day we'll build this house, a place that never runs out of light." Mia smiled, and for the first time her smile wasn't just hopeful, it was believing. Later, as she slept under the blanket, Lucas sat at the workbench again. The small drawing lay beside his sketches. He began to trace lines combining her childish dream with his technical blueprints. Solar roofs, insulated walls, battery cells, that could store warmth like sunlight. He worked through the night until dawn painted the snow a soft gold. For the first time in years, he felt like a man with purpose again. When Mia woke up and saw him slumped over the desk, she whispered, "You kept your promise, didn't you?" Lucas stirred, smiled, and said softly, "It's only the beginning." Outside, the snow had stopped, but in the distance, something darker was already moving, the kind of storm that no weather forecast could predict. It started with a knock on the garage door, hard, sharp, and impatient, the kind of knock that never brings good news. Lucas was tightening a bolt on one of his old prototypes when Mia peeked around the corner. "Someone's here," she whispered. Her small face was pale. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened the door. 2 officers stood outside, snow gathering on their shoulders. Mr. Grant one asked, "We've received a report. A missing child." Lucas froze. His mind clicked through possibilities like gears grinding. "Mia," he said slowly. "She's safe. She's right here." The second officer glanced past him and saw the little girl hiding behind the workbench. "Sir, we'll need to verify that." They stepped inside. Maya clutched the lunchbox to her chest as if it were armor. The older officer crouched to her level. "Hey there, sweetheart. Your stepmom's worried sick. Says you ran off." Mia shook her head, her voice trembling. "She threw me out. She said I wasn't wanted." Lucas took a step forward, anger flaring in his chest. "That's the truth. I found her out in the snow alone. Check the weather report from that night if you need proof." But the officers exchanged uneasy looks. "We don't decide truth, sir. We just follow up." They left after a brief exchange, promising to file a note. But Lucas knew better once a report hit the system. It spread fast. By evening, the first article appeared online, Auto Tycoon involved in child abduction allegation. A headline sharp enough to draw blood. The story caught fire. News anchors debated his motives. Social media dissected his every word. Within a day, there were hundreds of comments, some calling him a hero, others calling him a predator hiding behind philanthropy. Mia saw his face on the television at the thrift store. The caption read, "Lucas Grant under investigation. PR stunt or scandal?" She turned to him, eyes wet. "Did I ruin your life too?" He crouched down, hands resting on her small shoulders. "Hey, look at me, Mia. You didn't ruin anything. You saved me." But the damage was already spreading. Reporters camped outside his office. Former employees gave interviews hinting that Lucas had always been reckless. Even his board of directors issued a statement distancing themselves from him. And somewhere behind it all, hidden beneath layers of corporate silence, sat Harold Vance, the man who had taken Grant Motors from him 2 years earlier. Harold watched the headlines from his glass office, the city skyline glimmering behind him. A faint smile played on his lips as he scrolled through the reports. "Let the saint freeze," he murmured to himself. "The world loves a fall from grace." Meanwhile, in the garage, Lucas and Mia tried to build a life within the chaos. He disconnected the internet, shut off his phone, and spent evenings reading to her from old engineering books, diagrams of solar circuits, sketches of wind turbines. She didn't understand most of it, but she liked his voice. It made her forget the noise outside. Still, he couldn't escape it entirely. One night, as he reviewed his old battery schematics, an email flashed across his laptop, anonymous sender. The subject line read, "You're digging into the wrong grave." He opened it. Attached was a single image, a screenshot of the exploded battery from 2022, the one that had killed 5 workers, including Mia's father. Underneath it, a line of text, "Stay quiet or we bury you next." Lucas stared at the screen until the words blurred. He had spent years pretending not to see the cracks in his industry, the quiet corruption behind every eco-friendly promise. But now, with Mia sleeping just a few feet away, silence felt like betrayal. He powered down the laptop and looked at the rusted lunchbox on the table. "The world used my father's death to cover darkness," Mia had once said in a whisper. Lucas knew she was right, and he knew he couldn't run anymore. The next morning, Tracy appeared. She stood at the garage entrance, wearing sunglasses and a coat too thin for the weather, her face hard and smug. "You've got guts, Lucas," she said, "keeping my girl like some charity case." "She's not yours," he replied. "Not by blood, not by heart." Tracy scoffed. "By law she is. And the media loves a villain with a wallet. Maybe we could come to an arrangement." He stared at her, disgust dawning slowly. "You want money. I want what's fair," she sneered. "A little compensation for my pain. Say 50 grand, and I forget this ever happened." Lucas took a step closer, his voice steady but sharp. "You left her to die in the snow. Get out before I forget I'm the calm one here." Tracy's smirk faltered. She turned and walked away, muttering, "You'll regret this, Saint boy." That night, the headlines hit harder. Grant Motors founder, under investigation for battery fraud. The accusation Lucas had faked environmental safety tests to promote his clean energy projects. He knew exactly who was behind it: Harold Vance and his army of lawyers. The next day, his lawyer called. "They're opening a formal hearing. The board wants your testimony. They think you planted the story about the 2022 explosion to win sympathy." Lucas looked out the frosted window. Snow was falling again, slower this time, softer. Mia sat near the heater, drawing her crooked house humming to herself. For the first time since the night he found her, he felt the cold seep in again, not from the weather, but from the weight of everything closing around them. He whispered to himself, "They can take the company. They can take my name. But they won't take her." And with that, he turned back to the workbench. The storm outside was growing darker, but so was his resolve. The truth began with a noise, the soft clink of metal against metal. Lucas had been cleaning Mia's rusted lunchbox when a small silver fragment slid loose from the inner lining. It was thin, marked with a tiny code, LP422B. He stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just scrap. It was part of a lithium cell, the same type his company had once produced. The same type that had exploded in 2022 and killed 5 men, including Mia's father. Someone had kept this hidden. That night, while Mia slept beside the heater, Lucas compared the code against archived factory data. The batch number matched a prototype that should have been destroyed. His pulse quickened. The plant's records had been falsified. He needed help. Someone who knew how to follow digital trails and wasn't afraid of what waited at the end. He found Jenna Park in a quiet coffee shop outside Detroit. She looked up when he entered, surprise flickering behind her guarded expression. "Lucas Grant," she said flatly. "The man who called me reckless journalism 5 years ago." He managed a tired smile. "Turns out I was wrong. I need you. Need me or need a good story." He placed the metal fragment on the table. It caught the light like a sliver of truth refusing to stay buried. This came from the battery that killed Mia's father. It was never supposed to exist. Jenna's sharpness softened. "You think the company hid the evidence? I know they did. I just can't prove who signed it off." She hesitated, then closed her laptop. "All right, Grant. Let's dig." They spent the night chasing digital ghosts, scanning shipment logs, comparing signatures, cross-checking inspection reports. By dawn, Jenna looked up from the screen, eyes wide. "Lucas, look at this," she whispered. These safety certificates were signed by Harold Vance under a shell company, Brightcore Energy. He authorized the entire batch. Lucas froze. He wasn't even part of the board back then. Jenna nodded grimly. He was unofficially. This isn't just negligence. It's corporate cover-up at a national level. He rubbed his temples. And now he's framing me to keep the lid closed. Then we open it, Jenna said. Together. 2 nights later, Lucas received an anonymous message. "You want proof. Come to that old warehouse on Highway 10. Alone." Jenna warned him it was a trap, but he went anyway. The snow was falling hard again, and the wind howled through the skeletal buildings. Inside the warehouse, rows of old crates sat beneath torn tarps. He opened one battery cause, stamped with the same LP422B code. Proof. He began snapping photos when the headlights slashed across the dark. A black SUV stopped outside. Voices echoed through the warehouse. "Destroy everything. No trace left before the hearing." Lucas crouched behind a crate heart, pounding. He aimed his camera through a crack, capturing faces, voices, boxes. The truth was dangerous, but finally visible. When the men left, he exhaled snow swirling in the open doorway. The fear that had followed him for years was gone, replaced by something fiercer. Conviction. He called Jenna as he drove through the storm. "I have everything. Proof of the falsified codes. Audio, video, all of it." Her voice trembled with adrenaline. "Then come fast. We'll make it public before they can bury it." Back in the garage, Mia was waiting. Her drawing of the crooked house lay beside the heater. When he entered, soaked and shaking, she looked up with wide eyes. "You found the truth?" she asked. Lucas knelt, setting the lunchbox between them. "Your dad didn't die for nothing, Mia. People are going to know what really happened." She reached out, resting her small hand over his. "Then you kept your promise." He smiled faintly. "No, we did." Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside that cold garage, the air felt warmer, as if the storm had begun to lose its power. Snow fell again the morning of the hearing, heavy, relentless, turning downtown Detroit into a blur of white and silence. The courthouse loomed like a grey mountain against the storm, its steps slick with ice. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, cameras blinking through the flurries. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. The hearing was broadcast live under the name Clean Battery 2024. At the front of the chamber sat the board of inquiry, rows of officials and cameras ready to feed the world. Lucas sat beside Jenna Park, folders of evidence spread across the table. Across from them was Harold Vance, his expression calm, almost amused. When Lucas was called to speak, he rose slowly. His voice, though quiet, filled the room. 2 years ago, an explosion took 5 lives. It was ruled an accident. But I stand here to tell you it wasn't. He lifted the silver fragment, the piece of alloy Mia's father had hidden in her lunchbox. The light from the ceiling caught it gleaming like truth made solid. This code, L-K422B, belongs to a batch that was certified safe under falsified reports, signed by Harold Vance through Brightcore Energy. Murmurs swept the room. Jenna displayed the documents on the projector, emails, inspection records, video footage from the warehouse. Each image was a nail in the coffin of deceit. Vance shifted, the smugness fading. "You can't prove intent," he snapped. Lucas met his gaze. No, but someone else can prove what it cost. He turned toward the back of the chamber. A small figure stood up, Mia, wearing her red wool coat. The audience fell silent. She climbed the steps slowly, clutching her folded drawing. The microphone looked too big for her, but her voice when it came was steady. My dad built batteries to bring light, she said. They used his death to cover darkness. For a moment, no one moved. Then quietly, someone in the audience began to clap. It spread like ripples through water. One pair of hands, then another, until the entire hall rose to its feet. Tears blurred Lucas's vision as he reached for Mia's hand. The verdict came hours later. The inquiry reopened, the company charged with fraud and negligence. Harold Vance was escorted out under flashing lights, his empire cracking beneath the weight of truth. Weeks passed. The snow began to melt. Lucas used the settlement money to build the Winter Light Foundation, a home for children who had nowhere to go when the cold came. On Christmas Eve, the building stood bright against the night windows, glowing warm. Mia helped hang paper lanterns by the entrance. When she lit the first candle, she whispered, "We can't end winter, but we can build warm places." Lucas smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft golden light. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the windows, falling on the quiet streets of Detroit. Above the doorway, a sign shone through the storm, Winter Light Center. And for the first time in a long time, the city felt warm. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10. And feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.